The first statistic I want to go over is suicide rates for Black populations from 2010 to 2019. And the most important thing I want you to notice here is as the overall US suicide rate is declining, right, from like 2018 to now has been declining, the rate for Black people in America has still been increasing. We don't know why that is. I think there's research articles trying to explain what are the things happening. You know, there's definitely the economic disparity, there's racism, there's a lot of different factors that can play into why is the suicide rate increasing. I can't tell you exactly why, but I want you to pay attention to it because it's going to become more, it's becoming more and more common for you to hear about Black people, you know, dying by suicide. And then the second one that I think is helpful to look at, who is these groups of people who are, you know, dying by suicide? And so this one goes by age, and then it breaks it down into Black and non-Black. You know, I've heard of children as young as 7, you know, hurting themselves to cause death. It is such a tiny percentage, but a tiny percentage of a large population is still like a lot, like objectively, it's still a lot. You know, when you put it relatively with all the rest of the disease, it's not a lot. But yes, you do need to pay attention to your 7-year-olds, your 10-year-olds, your 12-year-olds, because they may be having like these really negative feelings. But overwhelmingly, the people who hurt themselves, kill themselves the most is, you know, teenagers, early adulthood kind of groups. In the Black population, this is just a hypothesis, I think that rates decline as one gets older because they have survived through so much arduous experiences already that at this point it doesn't really make sense, or it doesn't seem like an option to just take one's life. And I think for non-Black groups, especially the largest group that harms and kills themselves is middle-aged white men. That number actually increases with age and then maybe tapers off in like the 80s. And my hypothesis for that is, in a world that has told you that everything is yours and for you and you should be able to do whatever you want, it's a lie, right? That's a lie to everyone. Everyone, you know, has been indoctrinated in that lie. But imagine being a white man indoctrinated in that lie and then growing to awareness in like these 2020s and realizing life is not what you thought it was. And so if this is one of the first times you're coming to that experience, whereas Black kids get that in America, Black kids get that in preschool. They get that in elementary school. They're inundated with that in high school. And so I think they have gone through even more because of the racism involved, that by the time they reach their 60s and 70s, they're kind of coasting. They're like, I have a lot of the skills necessary to help me make this through. Just a theory. Hey, welcome to my channel. I am Shareece, and I am talking to you as a psychologist because this is a topic that's very important. And so because behavioral health, mental health, suicide is so taboo in culture and definitely in Black culture, it's very important for me to talk about these things. It's just very important because awareness is the first step to making change. And so if you hadn't known anyone who's been depressed in your life, and I don't mean just sad, I don't mean somebody died, I mean somebody who, not even just high functioning, there are high functioning depressed people, and often these people are overlooked because they're producers, they do things, but on the inside they are struggling. They are struggling. Less easier to notice than a person who can't get out of bed, isn't making their own meals or meals for other people, isn't taking care of themselves, has no interest in anything. It's a different look, but generally speaking, the risk factors are the same. If you find this content to be helpful, I am asking that you like, subscribe to my channel, and share this with anyone that you think it may help. The next chart I want to look at is thoughts and behaviors for adults in Black populations. I specialized in child psychology. I didn't go into this is not a video on child suicide, but you know, as I stated previously, children do die by suicide, and the language has been closer to die by suicide rather than commit suicide. I don't really correct people on anything really when it comes to like language like that, because the language is always changing and we understand what's being said, but because I am in touch with the research and the academia, I use the die by suicide. So let's see what is being reported, right? Because even in statistics, you have to take everything with a grain of salt. No study is perfect. We are humans conducting this sort of research, collecting this sort of data. Think about how likely are you to report that you want to harm yourself or kill yourself. How likely are you to report to a stranger or somebody who's, I'm doing research, to tell them that you're depressed or not feeling well? It's usually in clinical populations, clinical as in, have been treated, have been diagnosed, have been hospitalized, that they have some experience with the mental health field, and then they report these things. So just think about that. These numbers are likely underestimates. That's my point. And so this is about past year in 2019, thoughts and behaviors for adults. And so they're talking about past suicidal thoughts. And for Black Americans, what was reported was about 4%, which is not that far off from the almost 5% of non-Blacks or the overall US, everyone included. So these rates could be higher for other groups, lower for other groups. It's like not large. 5% of 333 million people is still a lot, right? And so it's like, it's only like 5% of the population. It's just, we are made up of so many millions of people that the actual number and what people see is a lot. So of course, in my experience, in my work, I've seen lots of suicidal patients. I mean, from I've been, thinking about it a little bit, to I kind of don't want to wake up in the morning, to I have a plan, to I've tried already. I've seen so many. So for me, it's fairly common in my work to see this, but because I'm a mental health professional, I work with these sort of populations. And so they're saying made a plan in the past year to harm themselves. Blacks, about 1%, a little bit more for the overall population. Black people appear to attempt slightly more. What's not being said in any of these, statistics is whether there's a significant difference. Because, just looking at these numbers, they look fairly similar. So I would say, Black people appear to have suicide thoughts, plans and attempts about as similarly to all other groups. But if there was a study that said, wait a second, like these are actually significantly different and the numbers are significantly different, but that's a statistic thing and I don't have the study to say that. So overall, it's clear that Black people do die by suicide. It's clear that about the same rate as other groups, Black people are having suicidal thoughts. So, that's over like a 10-year period. What are the risk factors for suicide? And a lot of these things are the same no matter what race you are, but there are some additional things that Black people go through in America that other groups don't go through. And of course, there's other things groups go through that Black people don't go through. But, when I saw this list, I was thinking, it's so hard to figure out the cause. So risk factors don't necessarily mean the cause. There are a lot of things that go into someone feeling hopeless and depressed and thinking that the best solution is to end everything. But let's just look, because I think one of the most important things for us as humans is to be social creatures. I think depression is an expression of, I need closeness, I need intimacy, I need connection. That's why I think depression manifests as a sign that you need to get closer and more involved with other people. Be in service to other people. So when I look at some of these risk factors, one of the first things that stands out to me is family interactions. We come from family. The interactions we have with family sort of dictate or model the kind of interactions that we're going to have with other people later in life. And so if you come from a sort of dysfunctional family, and so a dysfunctional family doesn't have to be a poor family. There are lots of risk factors that are associated with being poor, growing up in poverty, growing up in impoverished neighborhoods. But you can come from a middle-class family, It's like, what does it mean to be middle class? You can come from an upper class family. You can come from a rich family. And in fact, rich families often have some of the highest rates of drug abuse, self-harm, mental health problems. And a lot of it is the dysfunction that happens in families. Not that rich families have more dysfunction, but money amplifies everything. And so any dysfunction that you already had, families already have problems, are heightened because now there's so much money involved. There's so many eyes involved. And people who make a lot of money are busy. They work a lot. They're planning things. They're doing things. And if they have children, a lot of times those kids don't exactly feel the connection between their parents. So negative family interactions. You could be the black sheep of the family. You can be the golden child of the family. All these things add pressure. You can be thinking, I am never going to live up to, right? And it's a perception thing. Your family might be trying their best to uplift you, support you in whatever it is that you want to do. They could be trying to control you also. But in the perception of the child, trying to figure out, how am I going to live up to my father who's a millionaire? Or how am I going to adjust when I have no father, or my father is an absent parent? How am I going to adjust when my mom is a narcissist? It's these negative family interactions that can really impact. It's these negative family interactions that can negatively impact self-worth, self-perception, and distort your interactions with people later in life. And so to me, family interaction sort of explains a lot, but some people had fairly decent family interactions, but they may have run with the wrong crowd. And so then involvement in delinquent behavior, such as stealing, breaking curfew, using alcohol or drugs. The people who become like lifelong alcoholics or, cigarette users are usually people who started smoking or drinking at a very early age. So 12, 13, 14, 15, they have replaced human interaction with their drug of choice. And the drug of choice can also be food. And so racial discrimination is on here because, I didn't grow up in the United States, but the programming is real. And so if you grew up in the US where the programming has infiltrated everyone, everyone, including your parents, what if you grew up the dark-skinned child? It may not be the white people in your life making comments about your skin tone negatively. It's usually the people you're most closest to making these comments, but it's all because of the system that we're in, which is why I focus so much on unlearning the programming. It's all a lie. The racism has been built on, making money, othering this group so that we can, dehumanize them and make money off of them, profit off of them. It's still evident today. Unfortunately, I do think things are going to get better, but it's definitely a big problem. And then access to firearms is one of the risk factors for a complete suicide. Lots of people attempt, but don't necessarily die, because a lot of people may use pills or cuts, and you can do those things in one moment, and an hour later someone can find you and you can still be alive. But usually when a firearm is used, it's sort of instant. And so if someone finds you an hour later, you've already, bled out, and it's kind of over. Trauma, anxiety, depression, which, can be family related, but also it's important, I think, to distinguish that a lot of times depression and bipolar for sure are brain neurotransmitter related, not necessarily under your control. I do believe in the power of prayer, but I also believe that God gave us scientists to help us combat these humanly experiences. And so if there's a medication that can help someone, I think it's in their best interest to use that, right? I'm not an advocate for medication, but I know that it has changed lives. So if it's for you, consult your mental health professional, a psychiatrist, talk to your physician to see what would be best for you. And then when you think about preventing suicide, treating suicide, prevention is a lot about paying attention to the risk factors. Are you noticing someone who's isolating? Are you noticing someone who's spending a lot of time online, on social media, in chats? I think it's hard for high functioning folks to share the things that may appear to be red flags with other people, but it's also helpful to ask the question of people in your lives. So if you are noticing behavioral changes in someone, it's helpful to do a check-in. What's going on? Is anything happening at school? How are your friends doing? Because you would hope that they have friends. If you are a person that exists in the world, you would benefit from friends. So you want to examine, what are the friendships like? What are the interactions like? Did they go through a breakup? How are they coping with stress? Because we all have things going on in our lives. How are you dealing with it? Are you turning to drugs? Has this person experimented with, cigarettes? Are they staying out at night? Are they being disrespectful to adults? Are they being disrespectful at work? Are they having spotty work attendance? Are they, is their work decreasing in quality? A lot of these things can be risk factors for something going on, just a thing going on that you might want to check in. It's very hard to predict who is going to attempt suicide and when. I'm not encouraging you to spend time trying to figure out if this person is going to, or when will they, or how will they. I do not think that's helpful. I think what's most helpful is, rallying around someone and offering support in the way that they can accept so that they don't feel alone. That's really the hallmark of suicide. Feeling alone, feeling hopeless, feeling like this is the only option. Like this is the only thing I can do to make the pain stop or to solve my problems. There are other options. I'm telling you, there are other things that you can do. There's people who've been in that position before who can offer help. I want you to check the description box for all the links to the charts and the articles and for the suicide prevention hotline. When it comes to treating someone who is suicidal, it's tricky. The research even is tricky. One of the things we learned in grad school is suicide plans, safety plans don't work. They don't work. However, they are great ways to facilitate conversation around someone who is having these thoughts and feelings. If they have already attempted suicide, that's usually the biggest risk factor for predicting whether they will again. But giving options for what you can do when you're feeling sad, when you're feeling down, when you're crying, identifying people in your life who you can call when you're having these feelings, understanding that if certain things are in place, if you have identified a plan, if you have the intent, if you know exactly when and where that you want to, harm yourself or kill yourself, figuring out, that's the time when you need to go to the emergency room and be committed so that you can be safe, because there are people who care about you. There are people who care about you and who want you to be your best self. Speaking with a therapist, someone who specializes maybe in trauma, someone who has experience with suicide would be very helpful in figuring out, how do I cope with how do I learn coping skills to manage my feelings as I go through the rest of life. Some people describe depression as sometimes a lifelong experience that they've had. It can be a lifelong challenge for some people. For other people, it's a thing that they experience in their teens, early 20s, that sort of pivots them in the direction that they want to go in life. There is definitely life after a suicide attempt. There's life after a diagnosis of depression. I want you to seek out, because there are so many resources specializing in addressing the issues in Black populations, wanting to help, educate, bring awareness to, and treat. There's so many options. And I hope, even if you are not suicidal right now, you may know someone who is. There may be a time later on down the line where you are. I'm encouraging you to share this video with them. Let them know they are not alone. You are not alone, and there is help. There is something wonderful on the other side. Let me know what you think in the comments. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and thank you for watching.